Hello again, esteemed audience. Thank you for staying with us. This panel is going to be talking about adoption, but is going to take a slightly different angle to it. So we call the panel Exposure as the First Step to Adoption. This is a little bit unusual panel for this event. This event was initially made for all kind of builders and diggers within Ethereum community. And now we're making a bit of a revolution here by adding somewhat institutional panel and by daring to explore other means to exposure to cryptocurrencies, and we do even reserve some surprises for you. Yes, Michael, you are the big surprise. Soon. Okay. So let's start by introducing our panelists, and I think there's no better way than to ask them to introduce their projects so you get familiar with what these guys are building. So let's start with Arnab, sitting right on my right. So can you share a little bit about what Stoker is?
Thanks for inviting me for the panel. Thanks, Daniele. Thanks, everybody. It's quite late, but thanks for also sitting over there. So I'm Arnab Naskar. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Stoker. Stoker is an asset tokenization platform. We started in 2018. We are based in Europe. We are tokenizing primarily Bitcoin derivatives and Bitcoin structured products. Core thesis is if Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset class, there will be a few hundred billion worth of derivatives, and that can survive on-chain natively. We are managing at the moment over $1 billion AUM under our infrastructure. The team is primarily operating from Europe. We are a VASP in the process of getting MiCA license in Europe. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for joining. Okay, let's give first, yeah, that's a good choice, yes, because surprise is coming last. So Jack, tell us a little bit about Moss.
Sure, I'm the CEO of a publicly listed company on the Canadian Securities Exchange. It's called Moss Genomics. We are one of the first to put Ethereum on the balance sheet as a corporate treasury strategy. So I'm sure everyone here has heard about Michael Saylor and such. So you can imagine there's quite a few of these plays in Canada at the moment, most famously Sol Strategies, also on the CSE. So Moss is got currently 300 something ETH on the balance sheet. We got started in January and February this year. So very early days, and that's the introduction.
Thank you. So initially we were thinking to compare different means of exposure within, different means of possible exposure without really holding cryptocurrencies. But now we have a surprise guest speaker, Michael from Aroka, who is going to share a completely different perspective, and I let him speak.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me. So I'm Michael, co-founder and president of Aroka. Aroka is an RWA issuer. What we do is a bit different. We bring Tradeify to DeFi. What we are doing is bringing stocks, bonds, and ETFs as a cryptocurrency. So it's a new asset class under MiCA in Europe. That's called Asset Reference Token. And it allows wrapping a single stock, bond, or ETF, or a basket of them, and bring them as a cryptocurrency. Now, what you have to do is change it a bit, because a security stays a security until you deprecate it from some functionality. And that's what we did. So we're closer, but not a utility, but closer to a utility. And we're 100% backed, fully transparent via proof of reserve. And you buy Tesla on Uniswap or S&P 500 on maybe another Aerodrome, maybe, or GMX. I'm sorry, we have multi-chain, but obviously we love ETH, and even though we are working with the L2s, we still love ETH.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's funny. So basically, what you just heard is showing that Michael's project will allow people who have been long time in crypto, who have considerable wealth, who would like to access traditional market without really getting outside of the crypto ecosystem, which is amazing. Now, when you were just saying that, it reminded me, and please don't kill me for the reference, but it reminds me FTX. Because when FTX was still good, there were times like this before things went completely sour. Sam Bankman-Fried had this idea, and he did introduce Tesla. And if I'm not mistaken,
That's correct.
he even allowed people to invest into Coinbase.
Yeah,
via his
that's
system,
true.
right? So
What they did is they worked with a German issuer called CM Equities.
Yes.
Binance and FTX both worked with the same issuer. And what happened was Buffin, the German regulator, just called them and said, "What are you doing? You're selling securities on centralized exchanges as cryptocurrencies. That's illegal." And they just shut it down. So that's history.
well,
But-
as you see, sometimes Buffin is actually vigilant. As
Well,
we
when
all remember the
something
case of
disturbs them-
Viacom. We remember the famous case of Viacom. So it's all.
They decide when they interfere, you know?
Since then, we make jokes about Buffin. But anyway,
You can talk about
we love
Wirecard if you want.
Thank you. So my next question is to explain a little bit to the audience, because you all come from different backgrounds. What motivated you to get into this ecosystem, and how did you decide to start your respective companies? So I'll give it to Arnab. He's sitting right next to me. How did you decide to go and create Stoker? What motivated you?
So Stocker started in 2017 endish, and 2018 legally the company was formed. That time there was no word of tokenization, RWA. Everybody was kind of running for ICOs. They were kind of afraid of the Howey test. It was infamous, this three duck principle, and everybody was kind of finding a way. And I think it's kind of Ethereum ICO gave the way, and everybody tried to copy paste it. And that time, like my background comes from capital market side. I am into the crypto space from 2014. And the question that I started asking myself is, after NASDAQ primarily, we never saw how the securities settled fundamentally changed, right? We had the dematerialization. I think every stock market is right now a dematerialized infrastructure. That means there is centralized CSDs, of the clearance house. In Europe, it's a Clearstream. In US, it's DTCC and all these players. They hold the securities because you require a trusted third party to hold the shares. But the blockchain is a very fantastic infrastructure as a registry that actually can be their trusted third party. So the question that we started asking back in 2017 was, is tokenization the logical evolution of dematerialization? That was very crazy. Like that time Buffett didn't, like we spoke to almost every European regulator back in the days, and none of them kind of understood what we're talking about. And it was crazy back in the days also,
Yeah.
right? And still crazy, right? Back in the day, it was like wild, right? And that's kind of, I think, that bug, why not we try innovate in the base layer on the first principle basis, rather than thinking on some front-end infrastructure that is Robinhood, Revolut, and all this infrastructure. And that's the motivation behind starting Stocker, is kind of fundamentally, can we make this transition happen from dematerialization to tokenization?
Thank you. Michael, to you.
That's fantastic. So we actually started the day Terra Luna collapsed. We started as a yielding stablecoin, but the word yielding is just not a word in crypto. We actually
Oh, it's
looked.
getting in, no?
Well, I don't think so. You cannot say yield in crypto. You can have a security that's yielding. You can't have a utility that's yielding. You can't have a meme that's yielding. Even NFTs cannot yield literally. They just turn into a security that same second. But we looked the day that Terra Luna collapsed into the stablecoin market. That's how we started. We thought about bringing an RWA-based anti-inflationary flat coin, they call it at the time. And to be honest, nobody really understood in 2022 what we're doing, and they looked at us as, like a weird kind of, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And we insisted in bringing this RWA into the cryptocurrency world and not into the security world. And we were looking through 25 different jurisdictions to find who would actually give us a license. And only in 2023, we met up with Shoham, one of our co-founders, an ex-regulator. He was the the department manager of the international department in the Israeli security authorities. And he said, and he's one of the global experts on MiCA. And he said that the 1st of January 25 introduces new set of laws and a new asset class called asset reference token, which we're utilizing. And it literally allows to just wrap anything, any ISIN, any IMC, any sort of asset which you can actually back or hold in custody and safeguard, and then create a token. And we use proof of reserve and a mint locker, so we can't just mint out of thin air. We have to have the backing asset in the account before we can create the token. So no under collateralization at all, over collateralization, if anything. And once we understood that asset reference token is viable and we could use it, we needed to take a few more steps, as I said, to deprecate the security functionality. But we're now with a legal opinion and a white paper and going live in July with an S&P 500 product on Arbitrum.
Amazing. Well, the song was written for you. You got to wrap it up. Yes. A rapper here. All right, Jack, to you. What on earth has encouraged you to put Ethereum on the balance sheet of a company which has genome in its name? Please share.
So that happened to be a vehicle we acquired at the end of 2024. People that know me, I've been in the industry for about 12 years, probably as crypto native as you come. But similar to like Michael Saylor was kind of shitting on Bitcoin in 2013 on a tweet, and then he comes in to do Bitcoin. I always kick myself for missing the ETH ICO. I was right there and passed. Was too much of a Bitcoin maxi at the time. And so when it came to this idea of like a restart of bringing ETH into a public listed company, I thought it was worth the experiment, because it hasn't been done yet. People favor doing BTC and Solana, but if I were to take a step back, like being in this industry for like 10 years, right? You hear from 2013, 14, there was like Blythe Masters with like digital asset holdings and also like R3. And at that time, you were the crypto guy backing a $5 billion asset, while these creators of like credit default swaps are telling you, that's a cool technology, but we're going to take it from here. We're going to have our own private blockchain. This is how things are going to happen. You witnessed Tether being like a single-digit million issuance in 2015, 2016, and you see that grow. So to me, I don't think the opportunity, and also the failure of the STO movement in 2018, is just so obvious that sometimes the obvious things is not the right things. No offense. It's just like, if there's this huge asset class, and you're like, let's go use this technology to make stocks 24/7 and whatever else. I don't like that, because you could tokenize Tesla all you want. Tesla is still going to be a car company or whatever it is. It's like whatever company
it has Bitcoin on its balance sheet as well.
It has Bitcoin on balance sheet, yeah, sure. Yeah. But you see, like even Tesla, as innovative as they are, has to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
It's double exposure, I'm saying.
Bitcoin does not need to put cars on the ledger. You see?
Yet.
Not yet. So when I think about which direction like you want to go, like you want to, if you look at the things that have been successfully wrapped so far onto the blockchain, like Tether is a leading example. They're the experts at doing this wrapping, right? They've chosen to do USD, and they've chosen to do gold, like two kind of risk-off type assets that crypto doesn't offer. So crypto doesn't really need these S&P 500 shares that are like, can't even outperform gold in the last 25 years. Crypto needs this to generate like digital economy, like dream world assets, not real world assets. We're done with real world assets. Crypto has dream world assets like metaverse land, like NFTs. And even ordinals, even if they fail over and over, it's easier to introduce new risk assets into the crypto layer.
Disclaimer, please, on ordinals.
Okay, I'm very
yes.
early to ordinals, yes. But it's hard for me to introduce a new risk asset in the form of taking a company public, right? I've now experienced what it's like to keep a public listed company, the legal fees, the accounting fees, the whatever. So there is just not that many interesting risk assets in the old economy, whereas in the new economy, there's an endless amounts of new assets. So what the market actually wants is a public listed company. Like today, there's Bitcoin, there's my company, Moss, is doing Ethereum. Where this is going is there will be some public listed company somewhere in the world, maybe Germany, maybe Canada, that's like, we put CryptoPunks into our balance sheet. That's all we do. And like that stock is interesting. If you think this like Bitcoin is non-correlated asset, whatever, then I'm sure CryptoKitties is also not.
I think
like,
Nike already have the banks on the balance sheet.
Huh?
Nike.
Nike?
Yeah, I think they bought the banks. Yeah, I think one of the big
Yeah,
Fortune 500
yeah.
already bought the banks.
Yeah, so
but not in big number.
and also like think about it, it's very easy for a public listed company to prove its reserves of the crypto asset. They can point to an address, they can point to like a custodian, they can give 24/7 reporting of the crypto balance sheet. To do the other way around, like what you just explained, like how to prove that you actually have the share in your custody, that is much harder. It's market by market and all that kind of stuff. So I still think that like, even though it's kind of weird for me to be part of a public company, it is that direction of like taking crypto and bringing it to the old rails is more interesting to me than taking like old assets and bringing it to new rails.
Understood. Thank you. So my next question is, I would love to understand, and I think the audience will share my opinion, who are your end customers? Who are the people buying your products?
I think I'll just answer first to one that you raised. Actually, very interesting, right? This year we saw a very historic, monumental movement. Is we have the strategic Bitcoin reserve coming from U.S. government, right? And that's very interesting because the crypto reserve, they said, it's actually about selling the crypto assets, and the Bitcoin reserve is to buy the Bitcoin assets. And if you see, compared to the Bitcoin ETFs, it's something around 114 billion AUM. The ETH ETF is barely struggling to stay around 9 billion AUM. Its outflows are much more higher, I think at 6 billion right now. So it's not all assets are treasury worthy assets. You can put shoes into your treasury, but doesn't mean it's a treasury worthy asset, right? And this is what became so interesting. I think there is definitely some interesting delta, and I think at the moment there is a very interesting tweet I was reading is kind of the Bitcoin is a wartime asset and ETH is a peacetime asset, but which I kind of disagree. It's kind of still, the Bitcoin has a very interesting both wartime and peacetime element. And the user base, and this is I think the coming question where it comes in, for a long time Bitcoin was trying to get, or generally crypto was trying to get a lot of institutional money. And this year is very interesting. I think a few weeks back, the initiative of 21, I will just maybe quickly raise here, that's a very interesting, the partnership between Cantor, one of the Wall Street mammoth.
I was keeping it for the last question, but okay, let's deal with it now.
But it's interesting,
Yes.
but it's interesting, right? It's a Cantor, one of the mammoth in Wall Street. You have the SoftBank, they are the master of playing all this VC narrative, I think the biggest.
And you have Tether, which has been just brought up by Jack.
And you have Tether, the guys who manage the liquidity in crypto, like who decides the liquidity where it goes, right, effectively. And all these three guys are coming together and creating a company called 21, which is a SPAC. It's kind of Wall Street orphan child structures.
A
SPAC.
monster.
A monster with 42,000 Bitcoin, 3 billion plus, starting with this, led by Jack Mallers, who looks like a 14-year-old CEO with a hoodie. And that's a new world order we are talking about right now. And now if you're asking what's the user base, the user base is somebody who is running away from the safe assets like T-bill and all these things to an asset class where they think in this current global macroeconomic shift, they have certain level of certainty. And few weeks back, we saw the decoupling, where all these charts were red, the Bitcoin was green, and it's maybe 1, 2, 3 times, but if it happens over a period of time, it becomes an interesting trend. And that's the user base coming, is the traditional hedge funds, asset managers looking for double-digit return, asset managers who does not only rely on these days, S&P 500, I think this, the entire idea of that's a safe asset class is still questionable right now because a lot of pension funds are losing money in the last couple of weeks. So we are kind of going into the world order which is changing, and this hedge funds, asset managers which are holding massive billions and trillions, these are coming to this kind of asset classes. So I think the next few years, I would say, or even months, it will be very interesting to see what happens.
Indeed. Well, actually, I have to explain maybe why I asked you about your user base, because I honestly was a little surprised to see a few days ago an announcement about a raise of Upexi. Upexi is the name of the company, right? And I saw that the raise was led by GSR, out of all people. And I saw that one of the tickets was the ticket of Maelstrom, the family office of Arthur Hayes. And this really triggered me as I thought, I mean, if anyone has exposure to crypto, it's definitely Arthur and GSR. So why did they decide to back Upexi was a bit of a, a question for me, and this is where you come in. Michael, who do you think will be your user base when you're ready?
So we think that the user base is quite wide, but the reason why we're bringing it to DEXs is because we think that the long tail, the retail, is actually the missing link in the failure of STOs that we've saw. And we believe that the triangle between financial institutions, being the LPs mostly, and then market makers and the retail should close circles. That's how we see it. We know, I mean, people mention that, bringing traditional assets to DeFi is quote unquote uninteresting. But this money has no access to these assets and these tools. And we ask ourselves, and there's so much money on chain that cannot leave the chain. There's no bank that wants it. It has its issues, etc. I don't want to go into that, but literally billions that cannot go back to Tradeify are looking for stability, are looking for APY, are looking for more fees on DEXs that they can earn, or APY from lending vaults. And these assets, it's not taking a stable coin and staking it. It's better in that sense. And we see a lot of LPs, I mean, we have a lot of LPs now that are coming in to back the S&P and the next products as well. So we have a lot of demand right now. So we know that this is viable. I understand the doubts, because there are many doubts, of course. There are many doubts that we can discuss. But demand is high, and that's factual. So I'm happy for that.
Thank you, Michael. So, Jack, who are your customers? Who are the people buying your shares, if you can share? Like, what do you know about your end customers?
Yeah, I think people are speculating on if they can get the company to take on leverage, like the way Saylor has done. So, at first I was a bit naive about it. I was like, oh, some people like the Bitcoin holding company, some people like the Solana holding company, but it's not a coin picking thing. I was just saying earlier that like maybe there'll be a company that hold like NFTs on the balance sheet, but the gearing is a key part here. It's like accessing the bond market to take on convertible debt in order to buy more Bitcoin. So that what's funny is like, Saylor now holds like 500,000 Bitcoins, right? That is Bitcoins that used to be held by someone probably on chain. So a lot of his buyers of the shares are actually people that have no problem buying Bitcoin, probably already own Bitcoin, actively sold their Bitcoin in order to cash out to go buy MSTR to potentially outperform Bitcoin. So it's not this illusion of like, there's people that don't know how to buy Bitcoin and they have to have this stock. That's why people like ask like, what's the difference between an ETF and like an MSTR? The difference is you're looking for the corporate to give you the gearing leverage. So it's actually very speculative, some of these stocks, but that's probably like the speculative like stock market investor is kind of the buyer of the end equity risk, but certainly between that and the private placements is probably that your customers are crypto funds that, or like Tether that put up the initial crypto, and then also like bond investors that want to get this access.
Quick add up about your distribution. I have seen that you listed in Canada and somewhere in Germany.
Yeah, I think it's been a good learning lesson. It's like similar to crypto. Like you want to get on Gate.io, then you want to get onto like.
Do you have some arbitration in the end?
Yeah, and then eventually get on Binance or whatever. So in similar fashion, like it's relatively simple to get cross-listed for a Canadian company into Frankfurt, and we're also listed now on the pink sheets in the U.S. And then eventually, hopefully, like a Nasdaq listing would be somewhere in the pipeline. But the other thing I've realized is that like Bitcoin is so dominant in this narrative. So like last year, I was fortunate enough to like be part of the initial investors of Metaplanet before they put Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
Together with Jason.
Yeah, with Jason Fang, yeah, he actually came to Hong Kong. We were on a panel together, and all of them were like, one guy was running Japan, one guy's running Hong Kong, all doing Bitcoin. Looking at me, was like, why are you doing Ethereum, right? You're a Bitcoin guy, you're an ordinal guy. So again, I was just trying to be like cute with it a little bit. I didn't know which way it was going to go, but Bitcoin narrative is actually, now that I understand, it's not about asset picking. It's about who wants the risk. Then if you're a convertible debt holder and you're asking which asset do I want this company to be like taking on debt to buy, it's almost like career risk is alleviated if you pick a Bitcoin one, because then like if this company can't repay the loan because Bitcoin went down, then I'm sure Saylor cannot repay the loan either. But if you go out on a limb and say, hey, ETH could be a catch-up trade, then I'm now making like two bets at once. If I'm an investor, I'm like betting ETH can outperform again, and also that this company can make it to the NASDAQ to get like more liquidity. So we're definitely assessing people who know me. I know I'm like a very like a tinkering type of entrepreneur until you find like broader market fit. So that's why we've only got like, less than $1 million of ETH on the balance sheet just to maintain some flexibility to what we do next.
Thank you. Short one for you, Arnab. I mean, where are you guys listed right now on what your distribution looks like? And then one last question, we'll wrap it up.
So we have assets listed on Bitfinex Securities right now. So we are working with them for quite some time. Bitfinex is one of the major exchange, and they have a license to trade securities in 2 jurisdictions. And one of our flagship product, Blockstream Mining Note, is a hash rate backed securities, is listed there. One interesting learning, because the BMN, the Blockstream Mining Node that launched in 2021, paid out last year 80 million in Bitcoin, that outperformed Bitcoin by 32%. That saw majority of trading volume on a decentralized exchange than on a centralized exchange, because we have the trading data. And now what we are seeing, the BMN2 we launched last year, now it's around 640 million, around closer to that AUM. We see a lot of liquidities coming by collateralized borrowing lending. Effectively, right? We see some asset managers and hedge funds, they consider the bond is more interesting collateral than ASICs as collateral, because they had some good experience last year, a few years back, is the ASICs, if it's collateral, they cannot go in different jurisdictions and take it and put it in the warehouse because it's a hedge fund of 5 people. It's not possible, right? So they started taking this mining bond as collateral and they're borrowing against it, and there's kind of a dollar basis and Bitcoin basis loans are now happening. And this is an interesting scaling strategy, because effectively liquidity can come either by secondary market, by trading, or maybe even leveraging. That's what I think you were mentioning on that point, right? Why I will buy MicroStrategy rather than Bitcoin is because I can use it to my traditional banking route. I can get a much more better LTV maybe from the bank than I will use the Bitcoin. Now Bitcoin bank loans are getting attractive over the time, but it's still not accessible. I cannot still use in my traditional banking account and use Bitcoin back loans, or I can get Bitcoin back loans, but if I have MSTR, I can get that. And that leverage can be very interesting for a lot of people.
Absolutely. One last question, guys, and we're going to wrap it up. So it's not an easy question, but I hope you will be able to offer some advice. So basically, I would like to ask for some advice for the audience and for people who are going to listen to our recording on what kind of exposure strategies would you recommend? Like shortly, not financial advice, whatever you can say. Exposure strategies that you would recommend to an average investor. I know it's a bit tricky, but okay, Michael is going in first.
Jack doesn't want to answer.
The courage.
It's me to answer. All right. No, I won't say that, but I will say that once you have crypto and you have access to all the different assets like meme coins, NFTs, utility tokens, and now NASDAQ, I would spread that. I mean, you have low risk money, which you probably want, and we talked about the different purposes and different types of customers. So my basic customer may be a man like me, and he has bills, he has mortgage, he needs APY, he's not a meme coin like player. We talked about it a bit. I do play with meme coins, but just on my top of my balance sheet. So my basic assets are less volatile, and you hold a lot of that, let's say T-bills, let's say low risk ETFs, indexes, and things that are not volatile. And then your upper tranche or your upper book would be higher risk assets. Obviously, every company I think that I know works kind of like that. They have low risk on the bottom, and then, well, not MicroStrategy.
Alternative
Not
assets,
MicroStrategy.
they call it alternative assets, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I do recommend just a plethora and holding very safe assets for your, what you need, and then what you don't care losing, as people say, just go crazy. That's not my financial advice.
All right, that was good. Diversify and play it safe. Arnab?
So Fidelity suggests over around 3% in Bitcoin exposure, right? Which is very interesting, right? As a stocker, we have a Bitcoin treasury. We are currently between 100 to 150 in that range we are sitting. We believe in Bitcoin. We believe in a good treasury asset, but as you mentioned, it's like definitely see a risk. But 3% is a very interesting number. I think 3 to 5% Bitcoin exposure is very attractive in the current macro environment. Not an investment advice, quote unquote.
Loving
it. Jack, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. I think if you look historically at all these assets, whatever you like, the fact is like BTC has been the one that you wish you held the whole time. So if that continues and you think you cannot afford buying $100,000 Bitcoin, then you're basically always looking for something that will be touching Bitcoin that will outperform Bitcoin. I think that's key. So like you can try and outperform Bitcoin by doing something in TradFi or whatever, but that thing is not touching Bitcoin. Like, if you think about like Tether and how they were able to accumulate like a top 7 holding of Bitcoin is because they literally touch the most Bitcoins because they're the default liquidity pair against BTC. And in early days in our industry, it was like, buying the ETH ICO or something, but that was something you bought with Bitcoin directly. Buying into some startup in Silicon Valley was not the thing that helped you outperform. Most recently, the best example was, these shitcoins then appeared on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. So if you went into the ordinal space, you outperformed. But as people wise up and you know that everyone's like base number is like Bitcoin denominated, then the outperformance doesn't go as long, right? So like even on something like ETH, maybe $40 was the right time to sell ETH for Bitcoin using today's ETH BTC ratio. Because like at ETH $40, I think Bitcoin was like 600 or something. So Bitcoin is up 150 times since then. Not sure if my math is correct. If ETH is up 150 times, it's not, right?
It's an ETH conference. Let's not calculate.
You see what I mean? So like with ordinals, it had like a one year outperformance, like
generosity, please.
9 months
to the host.
So you should think about this also with these treasury companies. Like if you think like Bitcoin is what you actually want to end up with, actual Bitcoin, then there's a certain amount of time you want to be in MicroStrategy or the next MicroStrategy or the next MicroStrategy. But this game is getting very optimized, where it's like, instead of ratcheting the premium up slowly so that even the investors of the shares can enjoy that, it is now like a massive injection of 42,000 Bitcoins by 21. They get to enjoy this entire 2-3x premium because they get in at par into like a shell vehicle, a SPAC. The actual investor buying this $10 billion company that has only $3 billion of assets, you now need some crazy scenarios for the company to start outperforming from your entry point. So I think like as invested in MetaPlanet versus like looking at 21, like these deals are becoming less attractive to the end retail investor and more attractive to the like already institution injector of the crypto asset. So that's
business as usual.
Yes, business as usual. So always
back to square one.
So look for a new narrative. You just look at CoinDesk Person of the Year in crypto. I don't think there's back-to-back winners. So there's not like one year it's Casey Wadimore, next year it's Casey Wadimore again. So like if your narrative was able to catch such a hype, like last year, Sailor's on the cover of Forbes, you should have in the back of your mind some kind of adjustment and be open to another narrative, and that's how you maybe outperform like Bitcoin.
All right, that's a good one. Thank you. Thank you all so much for amazing contribution. I think it was a really nice and dynamic discussion. I much appreciate it. We should do it again. Thank you all for coming. Maybe one last selfie before we go, and thanks a lot to the audience for staying with us today. Thank you, guys.